Hi friends! Today we're going to make chicken cacciatore, which is actually just chicken pasta with tomato sauce, vegetables, and chicken pieces. So we're going to walk you through all the steps, and feel free to pause if you ever need to finish what you're doing. The recipe is to serve 4 people. So if you got a grocery bag that had servings for more than 4, just make sure you check your recipe card because your portions might be a little bit different. And we're using vegetables that come from the recipe, but if you're allergic or don't like something, you can substitute it with a different vegetable. That's totally fine. So the first thing we're going to do is cut our chicken. Basically using a sharp knife and a cutting board, she's going to cut it into strips and then move the chicken over and cut it then into little square chunks. After we cut our chicken, we moved it aside and got a different cutting board and a different knife. And now we're going to cut up our vegetables into pieces. So we have a green pepper, an onion, and a celery. The way that Catherine's going to cut her green pepper is she's going to protect her fingers and she's going to cut really similar to the chicken, strips. And then she's going to move it around and she's going to cut it the other direction to turn it into little squares. She's going to do that with all of her vegetables. You'll see that she's putting aside the ends of the celery and the seeds of the pepper. We don't really want those pieces in our sauce, so we're going to cut around them and throw them in a compost or in the garbage. The last thing that we're going to do is cut our onion. And this is a little tricky because we have to take the outside peel off. She's going to cut off the ends and then she's going to just peel away the outside layers until she gets to the juicy part of the onion. And then we're going to cut our onion in half so that we have something nice and flat to work on to cut it up the rest of the way. This recipe asks us for some canned tomatoes, some canned sauce, and some canned mushrooms. So for our canned tomatoes, we're going to use crushed tomatoes and we're going to measure out of our cans 3.5 cups. Now we're going to use our tomato sauce. And we're going to need about 1 cup of tomato sauce. If you ran out of canned tomatoes, you could always just add a little extra sauce, because the more important thing is that we have the right amount of liquid in our food. So don't stress if you run out of one, just use a little bit more of the other. The last thing we're going to measure is our canned mushrooms. You could also use fresh mushrooms if you didn't have a can. We're going to need about 1 cup or 1.25 cup. Depending on how much you have in your can. So we're going to use just 1 cup. Now that we're ready to go, we're going to start cooking. So what we're going to do is take a big skillet, a big frying pan, or a big pot, whatever you have, and we're going to turn it on to medium-high heat. And we're going to measure some oil into the pan. You're going to need about 1/4 cup of oil. And then we're going to add our chicken pieces. We're going to cook the chicken separate from the vegetables. So we're going to do this until the chicken's cooked all the way through before we move on. While you're cooking the chicken, it's a good idea to get a plate or container ready to go, because when the chicken is cooked through, we're going to actually take it out of the pan and set it aside to prepare for the next step. If you have lots of people cooking together, you can always have one person cooking the chicken while the other people are chopping the vegetables and measuring out the sauces. It saves a little bit of time and it's kind of fun to cook together. So while you're cooking your chicken, it's important for whoever's in charge of cooking to stay at the stove to keep an eye on it, because we don't want to burn one side, we don't want to have a fire, we don't want to create any problems. So we're going to stay near our stove, and you can see that Catherine is stirring and moving the chicken around. She's just doing that to make sure that all of the different pieces get the same amount of heat and get cooked about the same time. Moving the food around in the oil also keeps things from sticking to the pan. So just when you pour it in, you just start stirring right away, and you don't want to let it sit for too long. The color that we're looking for with our cooked chicken is we want it to turn from pink to white first. That's going to tell us that it's not raw anymore. And then we're also going to cook it a little longer until it looks a little brown on the outside. We're looking for like a goldeny, browny kind of color, similar to the color you would look for in a good piece of toast. It'll be tempting to finish early because it's going to look a different color, but what you want to do is just take one piece maybe and cut into the center, and if any part of it looks pink, it's not quite done yet. Put it back on the stove, cook it a little while longer. The main thing you want to look out for is that the whole piece, inside and outside, has all turned white. Cooking pieces of chicken that are cut into little chunks is going to be faster than cooking a whole piece of chicken. We're going to move our chicken out of the oil and onto a plate or a container, and you can use whatever you have on hand. Be careful when you're moving your chicken out of the saucepan because you got hot oil in there, and hot oil sometimes likes to splatter and spray. So now we're gonna keep our heat on medium high, and we're gonna measure our garlic. So for this part, if you have cloves, then it's 2 cloves, which are those little things on the inside. If you have a bottle of pre-sliced garlic like the one we have, then it's just 2 teaspoons. And so we're gonna scoop it into the oil that's still warm from cooking our chicken. So we're gonna add the things that we chopped up, our celery, our onion, and our green peppers. And remember, if you don't like these vegetables, just use some different vegetables. So now we're gonna cook all of our vegetables and our garlic together until they look soft and limp. The onions will turn a little bit of a different color from white to a little bit see-through. And you can see, like we did with the chicken, Catherine's moving her food around, so she's just making sure that every piece is as evenly cooked as possible. If you decide to use carrots in this recipe, cook them by themselves first for a minute because they sometimes take a little longer than other vegetables to cook. So while we cooked our vegetables, we brought all of our other ingredients over except for our pasta. So now we're gonna start adding everything into the pan. So we're gonna put our chicken back in, and we're gonna add it in with our vegetables, and you can leave the stove on for this part. We're also gonna add our canned tomatoes and our tomato sauce. Make sure that your heat is still only on medium. If you put it too high, then sometimes the liquid will bubble back at you because it doesn't like changing from cold to hot that fast. So you wanna make sure it's only on medium and not high. And now we're gonna add in some salt and pepper. You just use as much salt and pepper as you like. Put a few shakes in. We've got big containers, so we're gonna just measure a little bit out to make sure you don't wanna dump too much salt in there. You could also pour your salt and pepper into your hand. And the last thing we're gonna add is some oregano. We're gonna add a 1/4 teaspoon. So once we have everything in there and we've stirred it all up, we're gonna turn our temperature down to medium-low, and we're gonna put a lid on our mixture, and we're gonna let that simmer for about 45 minutes. Now we're gonna boil our pasta. So what we're gonna do first is fill up the biggest pot that we have, about 2/3 of the way full. We're now gonna bring it over to the stove, and now we're gonna turn our heat onto high. This part takes a little bit of patience. What we're looking for is big bubbles and lots of steam. First, it's gonna look like it's getting hot and it's gonna have tiny bubbles and a little bit of steam. You want it to be really boiling so that the pasta can cook properly. If you try to put it in too early, your pasta is gonna stick together and stick to the bowl. So we're gonna wait and be patient. We know the water is ready to boil the pasta when we see lots of big bubbles and lots of steam coming out of our pot of water. So now we are ready for cooking pasta. You can use spaghetti, you can use linguine, you can use penne, whatever you've got on hand. We're only gonna put half a bag, but you could use the whole bag if you want. Just make sure that there's not more pasta than water. When pasta goes into hot water, it wants to stay together, but we have to keep them apart. So we're gonna stir it up a little bit, and then we're gonna set a timer or take a look at our clock, and we're gonna boil that pasta for 8 to 10 minutes. So now we have waited our 8 to 10 minutes, and we poked our pasta with a fork to make sure that it was tender enough, and we're putting on oven mitts, taking it over to the sink, and we have a colander or a strainer in the sink all ready to go. We're pouring away from ourselves so that none of the boiled water splashes on us. We're gonna run some cold water over the pasta. This just helps the pasta from sticking together too much. It rinses a little bit of that starchiness off of it. We're gonna make sure that all of our heat has been turned off of our stove and bring our sauce and chicken mixture over that it's been cooking for half an hour, 45 minutes now. And now we're going to add our pasta in with our saucy chicken, and we're gonna stir it all up. If you find that you don't have enough room in your pan, like you can see ours is pretty full, you could always pour this into a big bowl or put it back into your pasta pot if that's your bigger container, whatever is gonna make it easier to stir it all up. And we wanna stir the sauce in with the pasta right away because pasta doesn't like to be left alone. When it's done cooking, you need to mix it with something. So if you weren't ready yet to put your sauce in and your pasta was done, you could always put like a little piece of margarine or drizzle a little bit of olive oil in there and mix it all up. But we wanna put some liquid on our pasta. We're gonna stir all the sauce in. And our dish is now complete. Well, that's chicken cacciatore, or also known as just chicken pasta with tomato sauce. We are going to enjoy some of this now. If you ever have any questions, me and Catherine are always available to answer them and to help you out. We hope that you enjoyed making this food and that it tastes good and you have a nice, fun dinner time together. See you later.